I am Ben, and I'm sure many of you know me as Follygon. I'm just sitting here in ZBrush, and what I want to show you guys today, I have about an hour or so, and I think we could play around with some idea generation. And what I mean by idea generation is kind of the processes that I take and what I do when I can't come up with any new ideas. And I have a giant list of ideas, so that's kind of rare. But, every once in a while I'm wanting to do something new, and I just want to kind of do some maybe quick sketches or something like that, come up with a new idea. So I want to show you guys how I do that. And it's kind of like coming up with a thumbnail image. So for 2D artists, for someone drawing and painting, it's a great idea to do some thumbnail sketches in the beginning of designing and developing something new so that you can kind of figure out what you're going to make. And you keep it very small on your canvas. If you're doing a thumbnail sketch, it's just like a little square, a little rectangle drawing. And the idea is to kind of generate stuff quickly, maybe spend a few minutes on each one, and then from there you can get some new ideas. And that's pretty much exactly what we're going to do here, but instead of, doing little rectangular thumbnails, kind of like an animation panel, what we're going to do is kind of just try to work very quickly, maybe kit bash some stuff using some primitives, stuff like that, and merge some stuff together, and from there, hopefully we can kind of come up with a bunch of ideas. It's kind of like looking up at the clouds and seeing a shape in the clouds, and you're like, oh, I see a bunny rabbit, and somebody's like, no, I see a dragon. It's kind of like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start so you guys can kind of understand what I'm talking about and don't think I'm absolutely crazy. So, excuse me. That's why we have the Contigo for water. So the idea is I'm just going to start here with the sphere. And there are a few brushes that I like to use. The snake hook brush is a very good one for just pulling out shapes quickly, keeping it, loose and low poly. And how you do that is you come on down to your Dynamesh. And if you're just using one of the primitives, it should act about the same way as what I'm doing right here. And I'm just dropping my resolution down to 55, so we're at about 25,000 polygons. And from here, I'm just using, my snake hook brush, my move brush, and kind of trying to find a shape in the clouds. And, already you can see that we're maybe starting to get something here as I go. And I don't have real intentions with what I'm doing, but my intention is to work quickly and attempt to kind of begin to see something here and begin to try to bring it to the surface a little bit more so that we can kind of see what's going on. So maybe we want to pull this in. As you can see, I'm starting to create like this little maybe chibi animal. It looks like a little cute character, maybe something like that. And it looks like he's kind of got a nice tush going on here. So maybe we grab our snake hook brush, and we could give him a little tail, or maybe we want to just insert a sphere on there, give him a little fluffy bunny tail. And as you can see, we can kind of already start to come up with a direction. And maybe in like 30 seconds to a minute here, I've kind of already got a plan about where I want to go and how I want to go about this. So you could maybe even call this, after just a minute of running through this, a quick thumbnail for you. And maybe if you want to develop on this idea more, if you want to keep going, you can. Or maybe you want to stop right there and append a new primitive and start working on something new. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Dynamesh resolution at 55. And for this one, instead of, using the snake hook brush like I did for this off the bat, let's just use some of our insert brushes down here. So that is B, then I. You'll find a ton of insert brushes that you can use to kit bash. You can just use the primitives, which is what I was going to do. but it's also lucrative to kind of take a look at a lot of this stuff. Let's take a look at the Dragon Bones Insert Multi-Mesh Brush. If you select an Insert Multi-Mesh Brush by pressing the M key, not the comma opens up Lightbox. By pressing the M key, you can kind of see all the parts that are inside of that Insert Multi-Mesh Brush. And there are a lot of really interesting parts and shapes in here. And we can turn on our symmetry. And maybe instead of using just X symmetry, we want to play around with radial symmetry. And then from there, we can make sure that we're on the Y-axis, so we can get it around the top here. And let's, since we got a cube here, let's set our radial count down to 4, so we can lock this to our corners. And we can start to pull this out and play with it. And we can also grab a few parts here. We don't have to just stick to one. And we can kind of start just kit bashing a new idea, just like that. And I'm going to also Dynamesh all this because I just want to keep it really low poly, really just kind of fast and fluid, and just pull and play around with this stuff. So maybe we start going the idea, because we're using radial symmetry, we can maybe start playing around with the idea of like a spider tank, and you know, we're obviously using like bony structure, so maybe like it's a skeletal spider creature. There's just a ton of ideas and ability here to kind of go any direction that you want. And I'm just using the move brush right now, plus backface masking. Backface masking is a great tool. I'll go ahead and open that up. It's in your brush palette under auto masking, and backface masking is right there. Essentially what it does is it masks all polygons except for the direction that you are pushing those polygons. So as you can see, whoops, wrong brush. Let me grab that move brush again. And as you can see here, depending on the way I move these, the backface polygons will not react to that. So maybe we like some of the shapes that we're building up through here, and we can continue to kind of blend some of this stuff together. And let's go ahead and grab a new part, and we need our Insert Multi-Mesh Dragon Bone again. And instead of using that brush, let's go ahead and grab our machine parts instead. So I was kind of talking about like maybe mechanical or hard surface. So we want to do something like that. Hey Helion, how you doing, bud? So let's go ahead and grab some mechanical parts here. So these are all pretty round already. So let's grab a piece here. Let's go ahead and grab our tech port. And instead of using our radial symmetry, because as we draw that out, we're going to get a lot of craziness going on in there. And maybe we like that. That's totally cool. If we just want to leave that, that's fine. But you could also turn off your symmetry. And the fact that we're kind of keeping this low poly anyway, just with Dynamesh, is super cool as well. So at this point, what I would like to do, just really quickly, just to get back on X symmetry, I'm just going to press Mirror and Weld. So that's going to really quickly just kind of get everything back to an X symmetry plane and mirror across that plane as well. So Mirror and Weld, I believe it's in your geometry palette, probably under Modify Topology, just in case if you're not using my UI here. So from here, we're kind of building up the idea of like a spider tank or maybe a monster, some kind of creature here. And again, in just a few short minutes, we're able to kind of generate an idea or a thumbnail just by kit bashing. So let's go ahead and do another here. And what I like to do sometimes is kind of move without intent if I have no idea what I want to make that day, or for that one. Anatomy study. You are doing anatomy study. That is a fantastic idea. I have some anatomy books right here on my desk, actually. So you could move forward like I was with these, with no intent. You know, you're just kind of trucking along and really quickly, just in a few minutes, trying to generate something, a thumbnail. And you don't have to feel bad about it being garbage or looking terrible, low poly. It doesn't matter because your intent was to do it quickly and just to get something on the page, on the canvas. And what we're going to do is try to move forward very quickly with intent. So let's maybe think of insect-like, something that's got a shell. So I'm not even going to use any reference. I am just going to kind of spitball it and try to make maybe some kind of alien thumbnail insect just very quickly. So maybe you could start off with some horns, and a lot of insects have, not necessarily horns, but I think they're actually called antlers for insects. I don't know if that's true. I might have just made that up. If I did, that's awesome. So just playing around with ideas here, and I'm just using my clay tubes brush, blocking out maybe where the eyes would be. We can play around with shaping this even more, and if I would like, it might be even better to just use some insert spheres, and insert spheres are great for doing stuff like this. And it also allows me to kind of have that masked off so I could maybe push and adjust some of this shape here. So you can start to see where we're going here. And I'll go ahead and keep these eyes separated just so we have the ability to kind of smooth these out. And we'll do the exact same thing, but instead of, doing a standard insect, that's kind of boring, right? We don't want just an insect. We don't want to do that. We want maybe something cool like an insect creature. So we start kind of just kit bashing some basic shapes together, and I'm just doing this roughly, very quickly. I'm not really worried about really what it looks like, but I just kind of want the idea there. And maybe he's a fat little bugger. He's a fat bugger, who knows. So you can kind of start to play around with these ideas, and you can see that very quickly you can kind of start to get your ideas on the page. And the idea is here again that you're not too worried about exactly your end goal. You're just worried about keeping things low poly. And in this case, since I'm getting even larger, I would personally Dynamesh this just to be a very low resolution. So we're at 9,000 polys, maybe even something less than that. And this is where I prefer to work at on this resolution, just because it's so much easier to kind of start to do stuff. And you don't have to worry about details. It's kind of freeing, honestly, to just be able to work like this. And depending on how much time you want to spend on each of these thumbnails, I recommend maybe anywhere from a minute to 10. But if it's just a thumbnail, I wouldn't work on it for longer than 10 minutes. But you can kind of see very quickly that this mask was on accident, but I kind of like the shape that's starting to occur here. And that might be like a cool kind of thorax or rib cage shape. And I know from anatomical study, on your ribs, you got your little hangy-do down in the middle, and that's what when that gets hit, that's what knocks your wind out of you. So maybe this kind of has some anatomical truth here, and we could play around with these shapes, exaggerate some of this stuff, exaggerate maybe this curve that we're starting to see. All these things with the idea and intent being to, just try to come up with ideas. So I'm just kind of playing around with the shape of the face. The more I curve it in, the more dog-like or Snoopy-like it starts to look. So maybe just smoothing that out and pulling it down to a point to make it look more insect-like, or you can try to block it out in such a way to give that shape. But these few variations that I'm doing right here are all happening just within seconds. So I'm able to kind of try stuff out relatively quickly. And that's kind of what's great about ZBrush, at least for me. You know, when you are in those points where you can't come up with ideas, well, you have the tools and the abilities and we have the technology. We have the technology to kind of, you know, try to come up with these ideas and do this kind of thing just very quickly. And it's nice. It's nice to be able to do that. So, as you can see, like I said, keep it low poly. Just try to create shapes. Just try to find out where you're trying to go with something. And work. And as I edit this more and more, it's starting to look more and more bovine. And maybe within my thumbnail, you know, I wasn't trying to go in a specific direction. So that's the direction that we can go here. So just kind of playing around with different shapes. It doesn't hurt to experiment, and you don't have to feel bad when you know, something doesn't work just because you know, it looks bad because you only spent a couple minutes on it. So as I'm going here, you know, maybe this could be some kind of like Indian cow god or goddess statue that I'm working on, and it has gems for eyes, and it's just really a way to kind of get an idea generated. And this is probably, if I was going to do something like that, maybe I would want to make it more realistic. But at least I kind of got the idea here of doing like some kind of bovine angelic statue or something like that. So you can see how this stuff is just really powerful, especially for people who, you know, in the beginning struggle to come up with new ideas and that sort of thing. Excuse me, let's check out this chat. Just using clay buildup and snake hook. Awesome ideas. It's just zen. Yeah, so it's pretty zen to kind of, no, I totally agree, to just like do this stuff very quickly and come up with ideas like this. So it's pretty fun, and you know, it's fast and free, and you know, with this stuff as you go, hell, you can combine some terrifying pieces here to maybe come up with something new. I don't know. But real quick here, I wish I could stay and watch, but I have to get going. Okay. Don't worry, Carl, we will be uploading this onto the YouTube channel very soon after it is finished. Actually, immediately after it is finished. And it takes about 24 hours at the most for it to be uploaded on the YouTube channel. And then from there, you guys can watch it from there. But yeah, so the idea here, again, just taking all these parts, kit bashing stuff, and from this, I've been able to kind of kit bash even more. And maybe you don't like any of these ideas. Maybe you don't like anything that you've created here, and you don't want to do any of these ideas. And guess what? That's awesome, because let's see. We've been streaming here for 18 minutes now, and I don't like any of these ideas. That's awesome, because it's only been 18 minutes, and I have a heck of a lot more patience than only sculpting for 18 minutes most of the time. So you know, I don't feel bad about wasting that time. And I don't even consider it wasting time, because finding out you know, what doesn't work is just as powerful as finding out what does work, in my opinion. You're very rarely gonna like get the right answer the very first time. So a spider mech, that's kind of cool. I like the idea of maybe doing some kind of mechanized creature. That would be really neat, and maybe that'll be a future video where we do some hard surface mechs, and I've done stuff like that in the past on live stream and on my channel. Or maybe some kind of like chibi Dota character or something like that. That would be fun. I don't know what the little dudes are called. They have like the big mouths. I don't know. You guys probably know. I don't play Dota. I think they're from Dota. I don't know. Again, I don't play it. So, depending on what you're going for, and if you're going for nothing, you can just kind of spend that time, get all that out of the way, and they're great for just kind of loosening up if you're about to work on something and you want to get some junk on the canvas very quickly before you move on to working on something, professional, for paid work or at your job or whatever you're doing. They're good for just kind of loosening up and doing that. So I was doing, I had the idea of maybe doing something insect-like. Well, that still sounds like maybe a cool idea. So let's try to play around with that a little bit more. And, as I kind of pull this out, just right off the bat, it makes me think of, I don't remember what the old version of the Power Rangers were called, but it just kind of reminds me of that. And, just doing the spider mech as well. I have all these ideas in my head about doing some kind of character along these ideas, this route. So I think that might be the direction we can take this and try to play around with this one a little bit more than we did on the last few. And I'll just kind of play around with shapes and try to get something cool on the page before we jump out here. So if you guys have any questions about how I work, what I'm doing right now, what tools I'm using, anything like that, just let me know, and I'll kind of talk through my process as we go here and try to elaborate on what I'm doing as much as I can, which can be difficult sometimes. Definitely talking and sculpting at the same time is not my strong suit. So I apologize if I stop talking and try to focus, like right now. Alright, so I'm just trying to get like this 4-sided horn. I want to create this cool shape. I just kind of pulled it out and I'm trying to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm just trying to, try to get some more resolution in here so that I can, and that is 200, we should be good, awesome, so that I can kind of use one of my trim brushes and maybe try to harden up this surface on this side a little bit more, so it's not quite so rounded and it comes more to a point like that. A little nice unicorn horn for our guy here. And the reason I duplicated this, I kind of just did it automatically. First off, so that I don't make any mistakes. I could just jump back to this if I didn't want to do anything with it. Or two, also with this, I'm a strong believer in like splitting up your mesh into as many parts as you can. And if you look here, I have like this transition going from this sharp to this soft shape here. And it's very hard to like try to blend this stuff and make it work together. So it's very powerful and very helpful and a lot easier to work with multiple stuff in this kind of scenario where you can just, I can pull that shape straight into the other one and it changes literally nothing there. So it's very, very helpful to work like this. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom, and that shape kind of cuts off there and stops. It's just a very, very good and powerful way to get those kind of transitions. And I can even use my H-polish brush and kind of try to flatten that out even more. And if I would really like to, there is a feature in ZBrush called Polish or Polish, and here it is, Clay Polish. And you can click this a couple times, and what it's going to do, as I just press it real quick here, is it's going to kind of polish up my edges and just kind of wherever there's a transition here. So you can see that it's maybe doing it a little bit too sharp here, and that's fine. We can edit that as we go. So if we want to start with the clay polish and then make some changes, it just becomes a really good way to kind of get started here with what we're doing. Awesome. So that's pretty much how I would do something like that. And now from this point, maybe I want to create some cool, like a cool visor, some glasses, or something like that. So I could look up some reference, or I could just kind of spitball it, see what we can come up with. I think I think we'll try that. I'll just duplicate this piece, and I'm going to use my slice curve brush. With the slice curve brush, you can get some really clean lines, some really clean and sharp lines. You got to make sure that you have no subdivisions though, or else it's not going to work. So just pulling that slice across, you can already see that we get some curve going on there, even though it was a straight line. From the front though, you can see that we have a curve, and that is because that, of course, it's a spherical shape. And I want to do a split hidden, close holes, and what I'm doing here is essentially splitting this up. So we got a really nice clean cut on that piece, and a really nice clean cut on that piece as well. And then from here we can split this one up even more. So let's pull up instead, and I'm going to try to line that up as best as I can with that edge, and that is not quite as good as we can get it. We can do a little bit better. And that looks pretty good to me. Alright, so let's try to split that off as well. And we'll close holes and close holes. And from here, we got these going on. So this is what is hopefully going to be some cool visor shape or something like that. So let's go ahead and slice this one as well. Now, before I do that, I want to make sure that it's all one poly group, so I can press Control W. If it's not all one poly group, you're going to run into a bunch of issues when you try to split some stuff and try to slice it and select everything. It just makes it quicker. It's more of a preference for me, but you guys can play around with it and experiment. So that looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and split hidden, close holes again, and really I haven't done too much sculpting here, as you can kind of see. Let's do some toy plastic, black, mRGB on, and we can fill object. So there we go. Start to play around with this idea, and let's move our light up here, move it more towards the front so we can see how that reacts on that. And you can see that we have a bit of, it's so flush here that it's like hard to tell that there's even like a difference here. And a good way to kind of offset that is to just scale it in. We can play around with that. So scaling it in a little bit, we can start to see that we have a visor here, and we can mess with some of the shape of this as well to kind of play with this. And with all this stuff here, like I was saying before, I haven't even really done much sculpting. It's more of, this is like really the only part that I kind of sculpted. I just used the move brush to make this basic shape, and I started just slicing stuff. And using this slice curve brush, or a lot of your slice brushes in here, are just a really good way to kind of start generating these ideas and thumbnails as well. And I definitely use those a lot, so definitely play around with them. So we kind of got this triangular motif going on here with the eyes and the horn, so we kind of want to carry that into the rest of our stuff here, just to kind of keep with the same shape language and have it all make sense. So we can play around with, and I want to make sure that my symmetry is off for this one because I'm going to mirror and weld it. So I can kind of play around with the idea of attempting to get a nice clean cut. And let's try, well actually, I want to keep both of these parts. I was about to delete one, but we will keep it. And as you can see here, I didn't polygroup that before I cut it, so that's kind of that issue that I was talking about you running into before. So I'm just going to select the polygroups that I do want and do a split hidden, close holes. Beautiful. And close holes. Perfect. And I'm going to run a mirror and weld on both of these pieces. And from there, I am going to scale this inner piece in. And we have our shape from the horn tucked up in there. So we can just kind of push it out of the way, use our move brush. And for this one, I'm just going to use my move brush and pull up. Well, actually, let's use our transpose, undo, slide her up a little. The reason I'm doing that is because when I scale it, the visor becomes visible in there. So now from there, we can scale that in. And we can kind of, play with this shape as well if we want to start putting some texture on it. Maybe I was kind of having the idea of making it look like a ventilation panel, but I also still wanted it to look kind of insect-like, so maybe like the helmet, which is kind of what this is turning out to be. These kind of look like pincers, and we can kind of play around with doing some ventilation here. So I can show you how I would do something like that. And we would just use some slices, and you can play around with this. And this is a quick and dirty way of doing it. So if I was trying to create something clean here, it would be a good idea to use ZModeler. But because we're just doing this fast, I think this is totally fine. And then from there, what I would do is grab every other piece here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm using the Select Lasso brush here, that specific selection tool. It will select edges. So if you're having trouble, and let me see if I can get it. There we go. So it will select edges. And if you're having trouble selecting your mesh or any part of it with a polygroup, just grab your Select Rectangle tool, and it doesn't matter where you click on the mesh, it will just select that polygroup. And it makes it a bit easier to work with. So we can kind of close holes on these pieces here, polygroup those, close holes, polygroup these. I'm going to auto-group them. And the reason I'm going to auto-group them is so that I can adjust them. But if you wanted to do this quick and dirty, which might be the best solution for us, we can just transpose them in and move them that way. And look at that. We have the beginnings of some interesting texture or ventilation. And we even got some stuff bleeding onto the back, and maybe we like that, maybe we don't. Maybe we would like to fill it in. But the idea here is that, in just 10 minutes, I've kind of started generating a thumbnail, and I did it with more intent than I had previously in our other quick thumbnails up here. So this was 30 seconds, just very quick, and then here we have something that was maybe 10 minutes, and maybe we don't like this. Maybe we want to tweak some things and keep going with it, but the core there is that it's still, just fast and quick, and we've come up with maybe some cool ideas. So that's kind of how I thumbnail it out. So I'm going to just kind of keep playing around with this. You guys can feel free to pop in, ask questions, or just hang out. So next up, what I would like to do is, I was thinking about, it's a helmet. So the helmet for a character maybe, and I'll turn my perspective back on. It would be smart or lucrative to be able to wear this helmet, so we would want to adjust it, or maybe it's something that kind of seals around your face, but it would kind of decapitate you since it's so smooth down here. So let's grab this piece, as well as we can go ahead and work with these as well. And let's merge these two together. And I will press Ctrl W just so I have them all grouped up. And it might be a good idea to Dynamesh, but for now I think I'm just going to keep it at its core geometry here. Do a quick save, because sometimes, with stuff like this, crashes can be imminent. So there are a couple ways that you could try to cut a hole in something like this shape here. and your first instinct might be to try to use a slice or trim circle, and those can work. Those can absolutely work, and we can kind of try to do one of those very quick and try to get a slice in there. But it can be finicky quite often, as well as, let's try and inverse that selection, turn on double. It can be finicky, and it can also, that looks pretty good actually, can also you know, cause some problems down the line. Like at this point, if I am wanting to, you know, close holes here, I'm going to get some really weird geometry. There are ways to get around that. We can attempt to stitch this up and close holes one particular direction. Another way I could try to do that would be to, you know, just very quickly, if I wanted to do this quick and dirty, I could slice it with my slice curve brush right down the middle. Let's see if we can do this. Delete hidden, close holes, and that's an okay surface there. It's definitely not the best. We'll mirror and weld, and as you can see there, that's like a very kind of quick way to do that, and I didn't do it perfectly or clean at all, which is, you know, just the nature of me. But the process works pretty quickly and pretty well. So this also alludes to the idea that the mask is something that maybe opens backwards or peels apart or does something to that extent. So we could try to carry that across the rest of our design here and add a thin slice up through here. So let's do that as well, and I'll just add a quick slice like that. Delete hidden, close holes, mirror, and weld. And that goes all the way up through the middle. So now it's looking like something more that could kind of come apart. And it looks like there might be a way for you to actually, you know, wear this thing. So this is the mesh from our horn, and I can just very quickly and dirtily, I don't know if that's a word, but it is today. Just delete that, delete hidden, and I always like to close holes. I don't like to have meshes with open faces. It's a no-no in ZBrush. You can get some bad things and some good crashes. So I'm just gonna, for me, keep all these faces closed. Awesome. So just a quick smooth there. We can mess with this more. But as you can see here, we're starting to get closer to something that might work. And it looks like this piece would be in the way. So let's cut it. Let's remove it. Let's chop it up. And the way I'm going to do that is just a slice down here. And maybe we'd like to give that a bit more room. So instead, let's auto groups this. We'll take this piece, cut it, select only that part, inverse, delete, close holes, bada boom. And that one's in there too. Didn't see that. So, whoa, I was gonna auto groups, but we're already auto groups. Trying to move too fast. Delete hidden, close holes, got that. Awesome. And this piece. So let's try to, whoa guy. Let's try to round this. Let's try to round it and match our original cut there. And, you know, there's some ways that you could get that exact curve by filling in this shape with just a primitive, subtracting it so you can get that curve, and then creating a negative to remove it from that shape. But that, for our purposes, for just something quick, I think takes a bit too much time. But if I was making something for production and I wanted it to match this curve exactly, that's something I would have done. And I would have prepared for that by just, instead of using a slice circle brush, I would have just used a cylinder that I adjusted and subtract the negative, just because it's a lot more clean and it actually closes off the surface around the edge for you, and it just works really well. So let's go ahead and try to match this. We can see what we can get. And it doesn't need to be awesome. It doesn't need to match perfectly. But with that, we can get something pretty cool. And we deleted everything. Whoops. Undo. Come on. Undo for me. We just want to delete this, not everything. Careful you don't. You got so many polygroups going on, it's pretty easy to delete a bunch of stuff that you kind of wanted, which is why I also recommend splitting stuff up into different groups. Very helpful for that kind of thing. So there we go. We're starting to get that there. Get that a lot closer to what we were envisioning. And just to kind of keep this consistent throughout, just get rid of that real quick so it's not poking through. And we could fill this in here with a primitive. So let's hide this. And it looks kind of junky and dirty from the inside, but that's totally okay. We're not worried about cleanliness right now, and you definitely shouldn't be, especially in the early stages of ideation and development. So let's append. Just a cube 3D, I think, would fill that shape pretty well. So we can just make sure that our symmetry's on, scale it down, and I'm doing a lot of this even with just my mouse, I realized. So when I'm doing just slices and cuts like this, oh, we got perspective on. I thought we were off symmetry. That would have sucked. So when I'm doing stuff like this, my mouse is actually pretty efficient for just creating quick slices and stuff like that. So don't think that you have to, it's ZBrush, you have to use a graphics tablet. Not all the time. Not all the time. Let's turn this back on. Not that one. That's not the one we want. We want this one. So even still, I have this original sphere. So if there's like a shape that I want to cut from this to make a new panel, that would be a great way to do it. And speaking of panels, you could even use panel loops to get some of these shapes in there. It's a great tool, but for now I'm just going to auto groups this. Select just uno, just one. And try to line this up just very quickly. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just enough so that it kind of looks like the shape blends in to this. And from here, I'm just going to mask off literally everything except for this edge. Pull it down. Push it in. And maybe not that much in. Pull it out a little bit. Instead, mask off these, and we'll kind of do like a kind of stair-step panel, or you could even, just use your move brush and subdivide or make changes that way. A good way to subdivide this here is that I'm just going to divide it by turning off the smooth modifier. When you have the smooth modifier on, it's gonna, here, I'll just show you. Turn it back on, and as I press that, it kind of starts to smooth the shape out. That's not what I want in this case, though, so I'll turn that off. Already learned a few good tricks. Awesome. Have you ever gone over displacement modeling? Not on live stream. I have not gone over displacement modeling, so I don't have anything like that back in the catalog. Is there something specific that you are trying to generate? Are you trying to generate just a displacement map for a character, an environment, or are you trying to load in a displacement map onto a character and then create geometry from that? So there's a bunch of different stuff you can do with them. But again, dividing this back up, we can try to adjust this just a little bit. So hopefully you guys can try something similar and learn, like they were saying, a few good tricks from some of this stuff. Awesome. Well, I was just doing that to kind of blend those shapes together, and you know, we have like maybe a decent neck hole, I guess is what that would be, and we could maybe bevel this edge. You could use a curve wrapped around it and subtract it from this mesh, so that might be pretty cool. You could also just attempt to get a nice clean slice along this edge, which might be pretty difficult, but if you can do something really clean, you might be able to get a really cool kind of shape from that if you cut it off and then just closed holes around that. So there's a bunch of ways that you can kind of start detailing this stuff out. I was talking about panel loops, that's another way. But if we like this idea, this concept here that we're working on, and let's pretend that we do, you could maybe, let me just fix some materials here. This material that I'm using, the toy plastic, we'll use, try black again. Basic material too. Try that. Okay, so if you like the idea, the direction here that you're going, and you would like to kind of stick with this, you have a good start. And you spent, now I've spent like 20 minutes or so on this, so another 10 minutes. And at this point, you're kind of liking the direction that it's going, and you can kind of still treat it like a thumbnail. You could start to duplicate these out, and what I did was I had 10 minutes to create a base, then another 10 minutes to create a variation. So from here, we can deselect everything that we've worked on, except for, let's say we really like, where is it? Where's our horn? Where'd our horny horn go? There it is. So we really like our horn. This is like the thing. So we want to stick with our horn, but maybe we like the shape. We like the shape of the helmet that we're building out, but we want to create, you know, another variation of what we're making here. So instead of, you know, starting all the way over, we still have our kind of basic base, our base sculpt, our base shape, and I still have this, and I saved it because I said just in case if we want to go back. And in this case, let's say we do, and we want to create a new variation. Well, now we can do that. So I've duplicated it again, so I have the base still, and now from this piece, I can start creating more shapes, new interesting stuff, and more variations here. So I have about 15 or so more minutes that I'll be able to do this, so we can try to create another variation in that time, and also answer any questions that you guys got here. Yes, the last thing that you mentioned, essentially, I think the last thing I mentioned was adding a displacement map to geometry that you have, and then turning that into sculptable geometry. I think there's a tutorial for that on Z Classroom. I'm not positive. I remember there being a really good tutorial for it, but that was like, when I watched that was like a couple years ago probably. So it's been a while since I've messed around with anything like that. If you're trying to add a displacement map to a character, the geometry that you get from that in ZBrush can be a little wonky, and by wonky I mean terrible and unclean, and the shapes that you get aren't super great. It depends on the resolution of your mesh and the resolution of your displacement map, but even if they're very high, like a 4K map and, you know, 10 million polys, you can still get some like really rigid, strange shapes. I would try to just find some free tutorial online. I would check Z Classroom definitely and see if you can find something from there. Tristan finally caught you live. Awesome, dude. Well, thank you for coming in. Essentially where we're at right now is let's go ahead and do a quick rewind before we do another variation here. So I was talking about the whole idea of this video is, the whole idea of this live stream is to create very quick, let's adjust our light, boop, very quick, fast thumbnails. And the idea of a thumbnail is like a 2D artist, they create their little thumbnail, right? And you sketch something very, very quick, very fast, and you spend like a few minutes on each one, and you don't feel bad when it looks like garbage, but it's a way to generate ideas. So idea generation is essentially what we're doing here. So I spent like 30 seconds just doing this garbage, and what it does, and I just used a snake hook brush and started pulling some stuff all around, and what it does is it allows me to kind of come up with an idea, and we're getting close to like a little tiny cute creature, looks kind of rabbit-like, but maybe we want to modify it and do some stuff to it. So 30 seconds just for that, you know, a couple minutes here to kind of insert multi-mesh and kit bash a bunch of pieces together, and we could start to maybe make a mech or kind of some long-legged spider-like creature, you know, just merging a bunch of stuff. The important thing here that I wanted to teach was that you keep your Dynamesh resolution as low as possible, and it allows you to kind of see shapes as you're going, and little happy accidents happen, and just holding the undo key you can kind of see where and how this thing developed from a sphere. So just pulling up through here, you know, I was thinking, ooh, something insect-like, and maybe he's a fat little insect, and adjusting some shape. Maybe its thorax could have some kind of inverse rib-like structure, and I adjust the nose, and it starts to look more bovine, so we start to go that direction. Maybe it could be some kind of statue or something like that. Let's look at our last one that we did here. The idea here was just to have an intent. So I was thinking like some kind of insect mech helmet was the idea, insect-like, and you know, we kind of went that direction. It's definitely looking, you know, hard surfacey, helmety, and you know, just very quick. In about 10 minutes we were able to get a really good base, and 10 minutes later we were able to create just a few variations here in the details. And the next step, what I was saying, which is what we're about to do, is to start all the way over, but not really. You still have your base that you really enjoy, and now we can create a variation on, you know, what we've done before. So it's just a really fast and good way to, you know, if you have an idea for a basic shape or what you want to create, you can start with the base, and then from there spend 10 minutes creating a few variations. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we still want to do maybe a visor-like structure. I think I like that idea. So I'm thinking, before, you know, we were looking very triangular. Let's try to do more blocky shapes. So more rectangular, and it can, you know, we got something sharp and triangular up here for the horn, something round for the head. And now maybe we want to get some kind of more blocky shape language into the actual shape of the visor and head itself. So maybe we want to kind of have some interesting dichotomy in the shape language, all kind of, you know, you got triangular, circular, and square shapes all happening at the same time. That can look a little busy, but because this is so quick, it doesn't take very long. It's a really good way to get a bunch of cool variations. So I'm thinking that for the visor, this time what I want to do is, you know, just flat shapes, straight lines, and let's go ahead and split those up. So split hidden and close holes. Same thing here, split hidden, close holes, and close holes. And then for here, let's, you know, still looking quite blocky, but we want to get some kind of thing going here. And what I would like to do is just get this piece. make sure this is all one group, and I'm going to split that. And I like the, it's blocky from this side, but it's going to be rounded from here. Don't worry about your slices not carrying across to your opposite side of your mesh. The reason I'm making all the slices on the left side is so that I can mirror and weld everything very easily. And you'll see me do that here in a second. So let's go ahead and start by pressing mirror, or make sure that everything's deleted, all that excess geometry. Got that here. We can delete hidden, make sure that's all gone. Close holes, I'm going to press mirror and weld. Same on this piece, close holes, make sure we are mirror and welded. Now from here, I'm just going to do what we did before. Last time I scaled it in, but because it's just a flat shape here, I'm just going to move it in instead. So we get a bit of an interesting kind of large visor shape there. And this is just one variation of hopefully many if you're trying to come up with some cool quick designs. So I don't even know what that sound was that just came out of my mouth. Let's do this. Let's add some black toy plastic. That's kind of like the generic reflective material that I like to use, toy plastic. But basic material too is also a pretty good reflective, just kind of specular material. It's not super shiny or anything. And maybe we don't want to do like all black. So get a little bit of lightness in there. You can also experiment with colors if you're feeling froggy. And from this point, be cool if we could start messing with the other shapes that we got here. So we like the sharpness of the horn, the roundness of the helmet, and the square blocky shape of the visor. So before we did a ventilation down the middle, and if we're trying to get something similar, we do want to create some ventilation. We could try to use this piece and follow along the curve that we have available to us already. So just pressing Control W to make sure that everything is one poly group here. And hey, just wanted to say that your videos are very inspiring and thank you for them. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you find them inspiring. I hope you can pull some good info from them, and hopefully from these live streams as well. But thank you, appreciate it. So, thinking about some kind of ventilation shape, right? And I was saying, let's follow this curve and kind of get the blockiness going along with it. But the more I think about it, the more I think that might not be a good idea, just because of the way that the visor blends into the vent. Like if I could try to slice that real quick. I don't know, it just might be a bit odd. But luckily I can do this like relatively fast. So, and I got all my undos as well. So, I'm never really worried if, something doesn't go according to plan. Kind of like this didn't go according to plan. That's not how that shape was supposed to look. But that's okay. I can adjust all this stuff. Maybe that's kind of cool though. You get this roundness, you get some happy little accidents along the way, right? So maybe that's something we would like to carry up into this shape, so that there's you can kind of see that there could be this cool oval kind of paneling on the side of the helmet. And that might be really cool actually. And this is kind of, at least to me, it's starting to look like a bit of an underbite on a lower jaw. So maybe we want to emphasize that if we're trying to make the character or helmet look that way. So I'm going to use my Move Transpose tool, and instead of scaling it, I'm going to stretch it. But I guess squash. Squash is the opposite of stretch, isn't it? So you could stretch it out maybe if you wanted to, and that might get you some interesting, cool shapes. And I actually kind of like that direction a bit more than what I was doing. So instead of building up, instead of emphasizing the shape, I could try to knock it down and make it flush here. And at this point, it's kind of reminding me of, oh gosh, what's his name? Judge Dredd. So it kind of looks like a more toonish, at least like right here. I don't know if you guys know who Judge Dredd is. I'm sure, yeah, you guys probably know. So let's maybe rotate that a little bit. Essentially, I want to attempt to get like a little bit of a gap in there right now, because I think it might be cool to make it look like a mouth. I don't know. Anthropomorphizing words are tough. Making something giving human characteristics to something that's not human, like a robot, can be cool. So I don't know. Let's play around with it. See what we can kind of come up with here. So I'm getting a bit of a bevel there, and maybe I want to adjust that as I go. But what I would like to do is try to make sure perspective's not on. Try to make sure I'm using the right brush. Try to get like a nice curve in here. And we could even, because I have a cool idea for here, append a cube. Actually, using this one might be a bad idea because it doesn't have the geometry that I want. So with any mesh, you can come down to initialize, and you can initialize it into whatever you want, like a cylinder. But I do want a cube. I do want a cube for this case. So grab a cube, transparent, because I want to see where I'm putting this guy. And whoops. Remember that alt-clicking on anything will select that thing. So I'm just going to attempt to align this. I'm essentially going to try to make some teeth, if we can, for this little guy. So let's ZModeler. Skip that. Quick save. Fun fact, when you're using ZModeler with symmetry on, some crappy things can happen. Some really crappy things, like crashing. So just to be careful, if you're using ZModeler and you have symmetry on, I would just kind of quick save often, or come up into your preferences, go under quick save, and maybe turn these sliders down so that you can quick save more often. So I'm just going to insert some poly loops here, and the reason I'm doing this is, one, so that we can kind of get some more geometry in here, but two, come on, there we go. But two, I want to curve this. I would like to curve this shape, and I'll show you what I mean here in a sec. So crease, edge loop complete, that's good, that's good, beautiful. All right, so I don't want to crease these edges, I just want to crease the borders, and then from there, I can start to curve this shape. And I have D on, I've D pressed, and D is dynamic subdivision. So you can get an idea of what this would look like when it's smooth. You can turn that off and on as you go. It's pretty nice though, so turning that on there, you guys see the curve, that's pretty cool. So turn transparent off, and crash, and that's why we quick save. So awesome example of ZModeler is not your friend. ZModeler is awesome, I love it. So let's go ahead and try to get back to that. So we didn't lose much, which is very good. But like I said, quick save often. So we want to insert polyloop, 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 polyloop. And plop, plop, plop. Try this again. Ooh, don't forget to crease up here. So crease edge loops, crease those. Awesome. Once more, please. Let's try it again. So mask, pull it down, see what it looks like smoothed. Mask again, pull her down, mask again, pull it down. And that looks to be a bit too much of a curve. Yeah, definitely. So where is my pen? What I want to do is turn this off. And then I'm going to match this curve up here. Whoops, I wanted my mask lasso. Thank you. Let's try to match that curve just a little bit here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we can give it our best shot. And you see like this weird fractaling effect going on there. You just need to move your camera a little bit to readjust that. And I'll turn on that lower piece back on, and I will move those up so they're not poking through quite as bad. And I will, I think, move this back a little bit just to flatten that out. Now, quick save, because we're smart. So let's see here, real quick. Chat got away. You still don't like the transpose tool? Come on, transpose tool is awesome. I use it all the time. Once you get used to it, it has a ton of just awesome stuff that it can do. Such as, like, really quick, if you're trying to create a flat, you can just make a flat just like that. How did I do that? I have move on, my move transpose tool, and click the circle with all the little red and green blue lines coming out of it. This is what I use when I'm about to 3D print something. If and pretty much always, I want to print on a flat, and that gets you the best kind of surface so that it'll stick to your bed, your glass bed, or whatever you're using. If you're using SLA or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You want it to be flat. You know what? I take that back. SLA doesn't matter because it's kind of floating and it's got a bunch of supports. Either way, if you are attempting to get a flat, that's a really good way to do it. Make sure that it is perfectly flat. It has the exact same effect as using a clip brush, clip curve, clip rectangle, all that, except that it's a lot faster. Let's see here. Great, gotta love crashes, absolutely. If it didn't crash, it will. Yeah. So especially when using that Z modeler tool. So just be wary and expectant of that. All right. So we have quick saved, and now we want to use Z modeler to bevel. Bevel is a kind of a cheap way, a cheating way of essentially just kind of splitting these. And I did something pretty interesting here, or at least I think it's an interesting aspect of Z modeler. Once you do one action, so if I drag this out to this size, or let's make it really, I can't make it very narrow. Let's get in here and make it very narrow. So see how narrow that is? Now I don't have to redo that. I can just click and it will do the exact same interaction that it did for that one. And that is extremely useful. But if you're trying to get it to be a different size, and you click and start to draw, and I'll try to make it really thin, and it did do it this time, but occasionally what you'll have to do is, if you don't want it to do the same action, is just, drag it larger and smaller than what your original shape was there, and you can kind of reset that tool so it won't do that again. So I'm just gonna kind of make out. I'm gonna adjust these to kind of get the idea of some teeth, and it's supposed to be like maybe some ventilation or something to that extent. but the idea is that, hey, it kind of also looks like teeth, right? So edge loops, I'm going to recrease these because they are no longer creased. Now they are. And while using the Z modeler brush, I can just alt-click or paint on these to mask them and select them. And this is a quicker way, at least for me. And then we'll try QMesh first. And that is not what I wanted, but you know what? That's actually kind of a very interesting, happy accident. So, maybe we could stick with that. And let me duplicate that, undo here. So maybe we could stick with that. Let's try extrude. And this will get us closer to what I was attempting to get. And then we can kind of flip between these. And I don't think that the angle of that really comes through unless I was to push that up more, or maybe maybe rotate this. Rotate that out like that. So maybe that happy accident was something that we thought was cool, but for now I'll just kind of stick with the one that I was attempting to go with there. And even looking at it, it's not the right way, right? I wanted to push these purple ones in, and we'll try to do this the right way this time. So I'm going to extrude, and I want to extrude a polygroup island. So polygroup, all the purple ones, and all the purple ones on this island, which should be this front face. Cross your fingers, and no, it didn't work. But luckily for us, we did get, so the island in this case was registered as this poly loop, which is fine because we can literally just click on these and get the exact same interaction that we would. But when smoothing that, you see that we get a bunch of weird stuff going on. So guess what we're gonna have to do? We're gonna have to crease some edges. So what edges are uncreased here? The edges that were just pushed in, so all these inside bevels. So just clicking there should take care of most of that, as well as getting these inside edges. So I'll have to go through and make sure I get all of those, including these. And I'll go ahead and get this one real quick, just so we can get all that. So before I crease all those, essentially what a crease is, if you don't know, is, let's zoom in here on a crease so you can see. So creased versus uncreased edge, I just uncreased that and recreasing it. Essentially what it is you have your poly loop, or your edge, and surrounded around those edges are an edge on either side. And it's not actually increasing your poly count when you do this, but if you want the actual geometry in there, all you have to do is create another edge on both sides, and it'll keep that edge from smoothing when you subdivide it, or smooth it, or divide it, or whatever you do. It essentially creases it, and that's essentially what a real crease is, but these are done programmatically, so you don't have to add any additional geometry. So what we can do is add in some bevels, and bevels are a good way to kind of pseudo crease edges. And not only that, but bevels kind of just make everything they make everything look more finished, more gooder, more better. It's true. So let's go ahead and bevel a bunch of edges here, and can be careful here because the bevel might want to go a specific direction, like try to wrap around this polygon here, which is not what we want. We want it to wrap all the way to the back. So sometimes when you're clicking on one polygon, it doesn't give you exactly what you want, so you kind of have to select it from a different area. But we are getting pretty lucky here, so I'm just gonna keep going, selecting these. And you can see that our geometry is actually pretty wonky here and in here as well, which is unfortunate, but we can modify that and fix it if we so desire. So this is it without any smoothing whatsoever. And you can see that it does actually look like it has some kind of smoothing applied, even though it doesn't. But those bevels are what are kind of breaking up those hard, sharp transitions. So those help out a lot. And we won't mess with that anymore. But you can kind of see the shape that we're getting here, and it kind of looks like a bit of a face, you know. So we can go ahead and quick save here. And I'm a bit over time on what I was saying I was going to stream for, so I think that is where we will actually leave off. But thank you all for coming. That trick was good. If it didn't crash, it will. Yes, yes. And that worked out wonderfully. Awesome. I'm glad you were able to learn a couple things here. Don't forget water or beer in your case. You know, maybe we'll do a beer stream in the future. That's not a bad idea. My fridge actually has too much beer in it, so if you guys want to come help me drink some, that would be great as well. Water, yes. Always got the Contigo, for sure. So with that, you know, we can go ahead and show off, you know, just the ideas here that we were able to get across. So with that, and turn off everything. Turn it all off. We can go back to our original piece. And very quickly turn all these back on. And that gets us back to the idea of where we were before. So just a way to kind of get some interesting variations in here. So I hope you guys were able to learn some cool tips, tricks, whatever I was able to show you in that short amount of time. And I hope the kind of stuff that I was showing you for idea generation in the beginning was helpful as well. So with that, thank you guys for coming. Again, you guys are awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next video or live stream. See you guys.